Welcome to another Optimal Game State. Today I am delighted to finally look at some official Warcry rules for Hexbane and Hunters. I think this has been one of the most asked for warbands that we've had in quite a while. These are members of the Order of Azir, the Witch Hunters of Sigmar. That makes them an Order warband, which is notable as it's likely the doggos will be pretty cheap. So depending on the price of Hexbane himself, this might make a good addition to the more elite Order warbands that don't have access to cheap trolls like some of the other factions do. As always, I go straight to the damage and wound plot. The doggos are nice and cheap, but not great wounds or damage for all that. Bridget is pretty low for damage, while Haskell is kind of mid. Amos is excellent though, and Pock is notable for having his ranged damage higher than his melee. Bridget and Pock are also quite low on wounds, but Amos is at a good spot for his points, and Haskell is surprisingly chunky. There are 4 abilities for this bladeborn warband, and weirdly enough, it's actually spread across 2 rune marks. We have the usual Hexbane's Hunter's bladeborn rune mark, so a sub-faction rune mark. Where we would normally have the rune mark for an existing warband, we get a brand new one, which is the Order of Azir. Mechanically, this doesn't make much difference, but it is a fun touch, and maybe we'll see some Order of Azir fighters in the future. We have 3 abilities specific to the Order of Azir, and one that's purely Hexbane Hunters, but again, that doesn't really make much difference. The reaction is Grim Resolve. It's a classic that lets them heal up D3 damage in reaction to being targeted. It's a solid defense ability, and as I mentioned before a few times, you're definitely going to use a action for a reaction if you suspect your fighter is going to die. So this is a pretty solid ability. Unfortunately, it does require the warrior rune mark, which everyone but the doggos have, so no Grim Resolving the doggos. The triple is Brand of Righteousness, which requires a hero rune mark, so in this case it's going to be Haskell. We'll look at it in more detail once we get to him. The quad again is everyone but the doggos and can be used after an enemy takes down a friendly fighter in the previous activation. So that will be any of their 2 or more actions that they have their activation. Each friendly fighter can then make a bonus attack action targeting the enemy fighter. It's pretty tricky. To match the standard move and attack of Rampage, you want at least 2 fighters to get a hit out of it. We already know from the plot that Bridget, Haskell, and Pock all have range attacks, so there's a decent chance you'll be able to get a shot with them. In reality, though, you're probably better off keeping your quad for Rampage. We know the most expensive fighter in this warband is 150, so it's likely you're going to be having in an elite hero as an ally. That's probably where the quad is better spent. Last, there is a double explosive bolts, which requires a brute rune mark. This is going to be specific to Pock, which we'll get to soon enough. Haskell is 125 points with some chunky wounds, and the rest is a pretty normal human profile. His firebrand does a average of 4 damage, while his pistol does a nice 2.5 at range of 8. This means you'll often be better off standing still and shooting with him to get 2.5 attacks rather than moving to do a average of 4. Now, his melee damage of 4 is fine. Very competitive ask would be for 1 damage per 25. So 4 is good, but not great. His ability is a triple that increases the damage of a crit by the value of the triple. So a triple 1 is going to up the average damage by 0.6, all the way up to a triple 6, which increases the damage by 4. So this is a pretty solid damage increase. Haskell has 4 dice, and if you're attacking with both actions, that's a total of 8 to fish for crits with. So that's pretty good. So he's hard to kill, has okay damage, and the option for a burst with a triple. I think he's solid, not super exciting, but you can get a lot of work done with him, and he does open up the rest of the warband. Next up we have Pock, who at 150 points is more expensive than Haskell. Again, he has the human warrior 4 move and 4 toughness, but with only 10 wounds he's actually quite easy to kill for his points. We'd expect it to be around 18 wounds at that point cost. This actually brought in some speculation that maybe they've got the points between Pock and Haskell mixed up, but who knows. Anyway, we go with what we have. He has 2 attacks, either with crossbow or club, although I think the model might actually have a sword in there somewhere. Anyway, his melee attack is pretty weak and it's only really there when he's forced into a corner due to the minimum range of 3 on his crossbow. The crossbow is where the action really is. It's 4 average damage at range 15, which is crazy good. He also has a double that boosts that damage, turning the next attack into an explosion. So a double 6 is going to do 3 damage to each fighter within 3 inches of the target, as long as Pock scores at least 1 hit. Unfortunately, with only 2 dice, it's probably not that reliable. Hilariously, it doesn't say enemy fighters, so you can accidentally kill your own fighters with it. Keep an eye out for that, though. Please don't try scoring mission objectives that way without double checking with your TO first, who I expect will say no. So it is a very interesting fighter. He's got some great range damage. Now, you can get similar with the Grundstock Thunderer for 45 points cheaper, but Pock does have range 15. Once fighters do get stuck in, he should have a good chance of being able to target any enemy fighters on the board, and his double ability has potential to do a lot of damage if the enemies are grouped. Next up, we have Amos, who is wonderfully simple. For 15 wounds, you'd expect about 125 points, and his weapon profile is the same. So for 105, he is a really good bargain, even if he is just straightforward muscle and beef. Cheaper again, at 95, we have Bridget, who is in many ways a downscaled version of Haskell. She has half the wounds at 10, which I think just goes to show how good a deal Haskell is. Her melee damage is pretty poor, but her range attack is actually pretty good. I believe she is the cheapest range fighter with an average damage of 3 or better, although the Quadron Overlord has jumped to 4.6 at 105 points. Alas, she doesn't really have any abilities to back it up. With the Warrior Rune Mark, she does get the reaction and the quad, but that's it. Again, like Haskell, I think she'll be a pretty useful piece to have on the board. You can expect to keep her out of trouble, maybe on an objective, while still popping away at the target with her pistols. Last up, we have Grotbiter and Ratspike, the two doggos. These have identical profiles and are pretty straightforward. They're fast with move 6, squishy with only 6 wounds, and do mediocre damage at 1.6. They're actually identical to the Wildercorp hounds, but without the abilities the Wildercorp rune mark gives them. So if you're allying this warband into the Wildercorps, then maybe just use the Trailhound profile. For any other warband though, they are the cheapest chaff fighter you can get in order. It does mean bringing Haskell, but Haskell and the two hounds are 235 points, which isn't crazy. You could drop 2 of the Black Talon fighters and replace them with 4 from this warband, and still have a few points left over for blessings. So personally, I really like this warband. They're not doing anything super broken or super powerful or meta changing. They're just solid, run of the mill. They've got a good mix of melee and range, and are pretty characterful for what they actually set out to do. The rules do kind of reflect the models, I think, in a relatively good way. Personally, I think I'm going to be using these with the new Cities of Sigmar lists and try put together something that's pretty thematic and back it up with a bunch of guys with shields to hold the line behind the witch hunters. Please do put in the comments if you got any ideas or places you'd put these in. And in particular, if you can think of any scenarios or kind of story-driven games where these would be appropriate, I'd love to hear it. I'm really looking forward to taking this group and bringing them up against that vampire bladeborn warband. Obviously, we'll pad them out with a bunch of undead and a few more steel helms probably to back them up. But something like that is always really, really fun. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.